Welcome back, I'm Kimberly and this is Floral Art Review. It's a site where we look at a design of mine from the past, recent past and long ago past, and we use our specially trained AI, Design Eye, to give us an analysis of that design using the 14 principles and elements of design on which we are generally based in competitions, and also it provides us with some ideas of suggestions for improvement of the design. This week we have a design titled Every Which Way. It was staged on a supplied plinth, as you can see, and the plinth is 60 centimetres square. The space we had allocated to use was a metre square, so we could go outside the base of that particular plinth that was being used. For the design, it had to be a contemporary design as well, so we had to use techniques that were different and of the moment, and so I decided that I wanted to incorporate paper into this design as much as I could, because paper was the stage where paper was just being introduced into design work to be considered as a plant-based material, so it could form part of the plant, part of your design, although the fresh or dried plant material still had to predominate. So what I've used is a collection of cardboard rolls from all sorts of things, sellotape, packing tape, hand towels, toilet paper, all of the things where you would get an item that is wrapped around a paper roll. The base of it, the actual stand that is holding it up, is a terracotta pipe, agricultural pipe we call them here, and it's on its end because it's a nice weighty element to have in a design, and it gives me that solid base into which I can put, and I have put, a number of bamboo links, and these were to provide some stability for the structure that was going around it, that was the tubes, because with something that's hollow like that or soft like that, you still need to provide it with some structural integrity. And so what I've done with the uprights is I've skewered or speared the tubes onto them or glued them, and glued them to one another as well, so there was at least 2 attachment points for every part of the design of that structure that went over the top of the terracotta pot. And it's resting on a piece of the paper that is now used for packing paper, so it's that sort of perforated, almost cardboard thickness of paper that we see increasingly in designs. Into the tubes, in some cases I've put vials where I needed a water source, and in other cases it's just the plant material, so there's it's all Australian native plant material, and I think we probably had to use that. That might have been one of the allocations. I couldn't find the schedule to be sure. So I've used Banksias because they can survive for this particular show in or out of water, and I've tried to link the tubes with some strips of Gymea lily, which again is an Australian native, and some smoke bush, and the long reed-like parts of it are from swordgrass or speargrass or grass trees, whatever you like to call them. And that my way of connecting the tubes and bringing some different softer motion to the design was to use those big loops, and it's almost mimics the curl of the Banksia leaves as well. The design placed second, I believe, and I think that there was no feedback from the competition, but my feeling is that there wasn't enough plant material, fresh plant material, that didn't, visually it doesn't dominate the design. What dominates the design is that cardboard structure, and so I needed to do a few more things around the placements of the fresh plant material to show that the every which way interpretation of the cardboard tubes was there as a structure to support the plant material. So I can see why it would have been down pointed, but it was a good result anyway, and I'm happy with the design. I'm happy with the way it came out. It probably not quite as, it's a little bit elongated for me. I don't feel like there's not quite the balance, the visual balance that I would like in terms of the structure itself, the cardboard tubes, but it might just be this angle. I didn't have any photos of any of the other angles because it was judged all around, and so it does encourage you to walk all around this particular design. So that's a good thing in terms of the way I've interpreted both the title and the staging for the design. So something else for you to think about as well when you're mounting these particular types of designs. Let's now go to the design eye analysis and see how this design meets the principles and elements of design. Form and shape, first of all. The design is dominated by the strong geometric cylindrical forms of the cardboard tubes. These rigid man-made shapes create a highly structural skeleton, which is then softened by the organic sweeping forms of the Australian native foliage. So that's exactly what I wanted it to do. It hasn't said anything about, as yet, about the overall shape of the design, but I'm happy that the form of the design is appearing to be the way that I wanted it to show. Line. Line is used dynamically here. The straight intersecting lines of the tubes point outward in all directions, embodying the schedule title. In contrast, the long thin green stems, like the sweeping grasses, create elegant looping arcs that wrap around the rigid structure containing the chaotic energy. And it's an interesting thing for me to read, because in terms of the design, I just think about the cardboard tubes, and yes, they're going every which way. I didn't really think about the line, but now that it has talked about the line, I can see how those two types of lines are working particularly well in this design. Space. The piece uses space exceptionally well. By leaving the ends of the tubes open, you've incorporated negative space directly into the structure. The design expands outward into the surrounding air, making it feel voluminous without requiring a heavy mass of plant material. It does, but when the schedule says 60 or 70% of your design has to be fresh or dried plant material, then this doesn't meet that requirement. 70% of this design is not fresh plant material. And I could have, as I said earlier, I could have changed the placement somewhat so that it would appear more so, because if you look into the centre of the design, from this angle you can't really see a lot of fresh plant material. It's sort of at the edges and sweeping around a bit, but it's not the focal point of the design, and I think it should be. But in terms of space, it's interesting to see that the space inside the tubes is the negative space that's being used in the design, and that's a good thing. I know that in every video I talk about negative space and how it is part of the design, but you can see in this one how it does form part of the design, because you do look through those tubes to see what's on the other side of the design. Texture. There is a fantastic textural contrast between the smooth matte finish of the cardboard and the highly tactile botanical elements like the leathery eucalyptus leaves, the spiky banksia, and the cloud-like fluff of the smoke bush emerging from the base and top. So a good textural contrast within the design. I just think there's too much smooth. I still think there's too much, because of the cardboard, there's too much smooth. It's not enough of the other textures to match the proportions of textural contrast. Balance. Achieving balance in an every which way structure is precarious, but you have utilised asymmetrical balance effectively. The visual weight is distributed around the strong central core, ensuring that no single side feels dangerously top-heavy, which is essential for a plinth placement. That's true, that if you can almost imagine walking around it, it wouldn't appear to be top-heavy in any way. It's almost bottom-heavy, I should say. The visual weight is very much in the centre and the lower part of the design, and that in terms of a competition where we're looking at points between designs, that might have been a telling factor as well, that the balance is not distributed evenly. And that's something that really takes a lot of effort and a lot of work and a lot of playing around with the placements to get right in this kind of a design where you're walking around it all of the time and being judged around all of the time. Contrast. Design thrives on the contrast between the industrial manufactured cylinders and the wild organic nature of the native flora. Well, that's good. I like the idea that there's contrast between those elements, those parts of the design. And I would like to see that there was contrast. There is textural contrast. There's not a whole lot of colour contrast, but there is line contrast as well, as we saw earlier. So the few things in terms of contrast that are contributing to the impact of the design. Rhythm. The repeating circular openings of the tubes act like lenses or spotlights, creating a staccato rhythm. As the judge walks the design, these circles pull the eye inward, down into the mechanics, and then push it back out along the protruding stems. And that's probably something that I didn't consider. When I think about rhythm, I think about the overall rhythm of the design. I wouldn't have focused so deeply on the fact that I was looking through those tubes, even though that's what I'm doing, even when I'm looking at this image here. I am tending to do that as well. And I can see how an independent judge, and this is the beauty of having this independent judge look at these images and just say, this is what is happening in terms of the principles and elements of design. And there's no personal preference, there's no interruptions, there's none of the things that happen in an actual contest or competition with a human judge. And so it does give you that very structured feedback that helps to improve the design work that you're doing. So dominance and emphasis. The cardboard structure is undeniably the dominant feature. The plant material acts as an accenting element that weaves through and highlights the man-made framework. So this is where this design falls down in terms of a competition where you have a percentage of plant material that should be dominating the design, because the structure does dominate the design, as I mentioned earlier in the video. Even though the cardboard is considered plant-based material, it shouldn't be more than about 10% of the design, and here it's very much more like about 60%, 70% of the design that's what hits you in the face, is the cardboard, more so than the plant material. So without using any more plant material, I could probably, as I said, do the placement slightly differently. So the smoke bush, even though it's coming out at this angle, placing it more in the centre or a little bit more following that line of the smoke bush. There is some at the top of the design, but have a line that followed it through the design up to the top would have helped to mask some of the cardboard that's shouting at us at the moment through the design. So let's now see what the suggestions are in terms of improving this design. First one, tube interiors. Because the tubes point in every direction, the viewer's eye is naturally drawn into their hollow centres. The white or pale interiors of the tubes slightly break the earthy natural colour palette. Painting the inside of the tubes a deep matte black could create an illusion of infinite depth and negative space, or alternatively, plugging a few of the openings with dense dark botanical textures could create an element of surprise for the judge as they looked inside. Both of those are excellent suggestions, and I can see now how distracting those white interiors are in terms of the overall design. And so I think what I would probably do, rather than I don't know about the matte black, because it introduces a very harsh element into the overall colour palette of the design. So perhaps I'd look at having quite a darker brown through the design, through the insides of those tubes, so that it gives you that darkness without taking away too much from the colour palette that's already there. And I would put some plant material in sort of the centre of the tube so that you look through and saw, oh, there's something in there. Great suggestions, those ones. The central core junction. In an all-round structural design, the central junction where all the tubes intersect is heavily scrutinised, ensuring that the binding or mechanics holding that chaotic centre together are either completely invisible or deliberately stylised, like the cable ties in the espionage video, which you can see in one of the links, is critical for top marks. So I guess what it's seeing in the centre is perhaps seeing some of the glue, some of the string that's holding the wires that are holding tubes together, and once again it emphasises how an independent set of eyes can see something that you've just glossed over, that you just hasn't registered with you because you're focusing on so many other things when you're putting the design together. So this is why it's a great way if you're practicing for a competition, or you want to just improve a design. You do a design and you think, I just feel like it's not quite right, what am I going to do? Use the Floral Art Review resources, upload your image, get the results back. It's there for you in writing, and you can refer back to it. You can look at your design and you can make the changes that it suggests and see whether that improves it for you or not. It's always there for you to help you in your floral artwork. And increasingly, I think it's a great way for you to step up your designs, to do something that you think, okay, this is it, I've done everything now. And rather than just take an image, take the image, upload it, get the analysis, so that you get a second set of eyes that's actually telling you what it's seeing in terms of the principles and elements of design. So it's very focused on your design and on the way that a design might be analysed or assessed. We better get on to the other suggestion. So suggestion number 3 is base integration. The flat woven textural mat at the base grounds the piece nicely on the white plinth. To unify the base with the towering structure, continuing 1 or 2 of the cardboard tubes down to rest flush against the mat could make the entire piece feel a bit more grounded. I think that's true, and I do recall that at the time that I did the design, I was looking for height in the design, so I wanted to use that metre of height and come out a little bit away from the edges of the plinth. And I think what I had in mind was that the terracotta pot was like a big cardboard tube, and so I wanted it to be part of the design but not have the design come down around it. So I felt that looked too messy. I wanted the clean column and then the structure sitting around it and coming down a little bit. So that was just my choice in terms of the design, the way the design looked. And certainly this is something that I could try and see whether that helped the design or not. So another good suggestion, probably not one that I'd jump at straight away, but certainly one that I'd try. There we have our analysis for this week of the design Every Which Way. That was staged on the plinth, judged all around. I hope that that has given you some food for thought. As I said throughout the video, visit floralartreview.com and have a look at some of the ways that you can improve your designs. And certainly if that's a bridge too far at the moment, just have a look at some of the other videos. We've got almost 100 designs that have been analysed in this way now, so plenty of videos for you to look at to help you on your floral art journey. I'll see you again next time. I'm Kim Bailey and this is Floral Art Review.